This is the Yadea Trooper 01, and it is a dang good looking e-bike. I really like these moped style e-bikes. They're fun to ride, they look fantastic. And this one is special because for only $2,000 you can get a full suspension moped style bike. So this could potentially be a fantastic alternative to the more expensive brands like Super 73.
So let's take a look at all the features. Let's go for a ride. Let's test it on road, off road. We're gonna test it on our hill climb test, and I'll tell you if this is worth considering. Let's go. So if you look at Super 73's website, I believe their cheapest full suspension e-bike is $3,400. So you're saving a whopping $1,400 and getting a full suspension bike if you go with this. In the front, you get an 80mm front fork, which is not a ton of travel, but is, sufficient for street riding. In the back here, I can't find what the spec on the travel is, but it appears to be between 20 and 30mm of travel. So honestly, not a ton of travel, but the big question is, how does it feel when you actually jump on it? I'll cover ride feel in a second, but let's look at a few of the other features. This sits on 20-inch wheels with 4-inch wide fat tires. These cruiser style bikes always have these fat tires. Helps a little bit with traction, allows you to ride on a few different surfaces, and you also assist the suspension a little with some extra shock absorption with these big meaty tires. You get a 750 watt rear hub motor with this, and this is more than enough power for just about anything that you would use this bike for. They've kept things simple with a single speed drivetrain, and that's because the seat is quite low. For me, a 6'1" rider, I very rarely am even using the pedals, so I don't mind the simplicity of a single speed over the potential issues that you could have with a fully fledged drivetrain. You get a 48 volt 20 amp hour battery, which is plenty large for just about any sort of ride you're doing. The nice part is that because you're not pedaling a ton, you can actually go a little bit longer on this bike before you start to get fatigued, and you have the battery capacity to go that extra distance as well.
The Trooper 01 is also UL certified, and it actually uses LG batteries, so they've taken a lot of care to make sure that the battery is high quality and also safe.
The seat can actually end up being a huge factor to consider when you're buying one of these bikes because it's not adjustable. It's quite hard to change one of these out. It's not like a normal bike where you can just, install a new seat super easily. And so far, I'd say this one feels really good. I think it's a good balance of firm to support you while also being soft enough for when you're going over bumps and that kind of stuff. So I've been happy with it so far. I like these raised BMX style handlebars, again, adding to the aesthetic, and it gives you a lot of options when it comes to angle of the handlebars, how close you want them to you, and how high you want them. You could always install a higher set of bars if you wanted them to be a little bit taller. So the pattern of simplicity continues up here with a very simple cockpit. You get your main display here and the connected throttle. You get a decent pair of locking grips, your front headlight, and a horn. The display is plenty visible in bright sunlight, and you get 3 riding modes: eco, mid, and high. You can also access the P settings by holding this button and this button. And if you want to unlock the fastest speeds and the highest acceleration, then you will need to go in and change those P settings. I'll put on the screen the changes that I've made right now. You get Tektro hydraulic disc brakes, and so far they felt just fine. I haven't felt like I need anything more. I like the fact that you get hydraulic disc brakes on this, and Tektro seems to be a pretty decent brand. You get big 180mm rotors. Stopping power is really good with these, and I haven't had any rubbing or any warping with them so far. You get this big front headlight, which really completes the look of the bike and also gives you some pretty decent night riding light. As always, I would suggest adding an additional handlebar light and probably helmet light if you're going to be riding at night regularly. My favorite is shred lights, so I will link those down below in the description as well. The fenders are built into the frame here, and you can obviously take them off, but the nice part is that it doesn't wrap around behind this wheel, and I think it looks better, and you have less of a chance of the fenders, warping or rubbing on the tire or anything like that. It's just a little thing that adds a level of convenience. And you get a nice basket here. This is something that the cruiser bikes always seem to overlook, that you've got a bunch of frame space and they typically do nothing with it. So being able to throw a little something in there is really nice, and I'm glad they included that. As with most cruiser style bikes, this is just a really simple, straightforward bike, and in a good way. What you see is what you get. So let's see how it feels to actually jump on and ride now. Okay, so with the 20-inch wheels, you definitely feel quite low to the ground on this bike, but in a good way. It feels like you're going faster, and it does have a very overall like motorcycle feel to it. It also feels really, really stable and built well. Now this does have full suspension, but with the travel being a little lower, I have found that it is quite stiff and bumpy still. The nice part, and a part that I do want to emphasize with this bike, is that even if everything isn't perfect or exactly where I want it to be, this still is a great foundation if you're looking to modify a bike. Super 73 has a really big community of modders and of people who switch out batteries, controllers, motors, and make other upgrades and accessory changes to their bikes. And this could be an opportunity to get your foot in the door for a relatively inexpensive price to be able to modify and change and upgrade this. So even though this suspension is shorter, you can switch out the suspension, especially this back spring, quite easily. You can switch it out for air suspension or an upgraded spring, something like that. Something that might give you a little bit more travel or maybe a plusher overall feel. So the suspension not being perfect out of the box isn't any sort of deal breaker or large issue for me because of how good the price is. So when it comes to acceleration, this is pretty decent. You have a touch of throttle lag. You can see I press that down and it takes a second to kick in. I'm at the top speeds now, so it's not gonna kick in anyway. But you do have about half a second of throttle lag, but it isn't a huge deal. Yadea actually says it's for safety, so that if you do accidentally press this or hit this or whatever, it's not gonna jump forward on you. Do what you will with that information. This does have a top speed of 20 miles an hour with the throttle. Even if you go into the P settings and up the top speed, that only changes the pedal speed. And with pedaling, as I mentioned, it is quite awkward to pedal this bike with how close the seat is to the pedals. So even if I were a shorter rider, I still think it would be pretty awkward. So you are going to be almost exclusively using the throttle. I have the acceleration all the way up, and this thing is pretty decent when you punch it. It really jumps up to the 20 mile an hour top speed quite quickly, and you can tell that the motor has more to give. Would it be nice to see a higher top throttle speed, like having a quote-unquote off-road mode where you could go beyond class 2 and have a little bit more speed? Yeah, it would be nice, but 20 miles an hour is still plenty fast for a commute, and it feels faster with how low to the ground you are. As mentioned, the brakes are really good. Because you're only decelerating from 20 miles an hour, they don't have to be amazing, but they still feel really, really good. All things considered, you can lock up quite easily, and you have a lot of progression if you want to make small little adjustments to your speed. Even going off a curb like that, you can kind of feel how solidly it's built. That is, like, to me, the biggest positive of this bike is the construction quality. It really does have quite a bulletproof feel to it. It's got a thunk rather than a rattle when it goes over bumps and that kind of stuff. This battery between my legs is actually not awkward at all, and it doesn't get hot. Even in currently 80-degree weather in Las Vegas, I'm not worried about this battery being between my legs at all. Range-wise, the fact that the motor doesn't necessarily use the full range of power that it has is actually a benefit for range. You'll see a bump up in your range even when you're riding at the highest speed. So 20 amp hours is a really good sized battery. I'm gonna get a little off-road test here. With kind of the shorter, stiffer suspension, it actually does better in situations where there's a lot of really aggressive bumps. You can soak those up better than the small stuff since it's not quite as plush. Fat tire bikes like this really dominate dirt trails in terms of traction and being able to maintain high speeds. These fat tire bikes are still quite capable on dirt roads like this, which is why they can still make for really good e-bikes to use while camping or RVing or potentially even things like fishing or hunting, that kind of stuff. I definitely have to lift off of the seat a little when I'm riding over larger bumps with this rear suspension being as short travel as it is. It handles that bigger stuff nicely because of how wide the tires are. It can get traction on these. You can get traction on these larger stones here. Okay, we are here at the RiderGuide hill test. We're going to do this all with the throttle. So highest speed mode, throttle only. 3, 2, 1, go. Ooh, it's chugging off the start here. And time. So it did accelerate the whole way, but it really struggled with torque, with low-end torque getting going initially. Overall, on hills, I have been noticing that it has plenty of power to get up hills. It just does seem to struggle getting going from a stop on an incline. Overall, though, accelerating the whole way up the hill is a really good sign, and something that not all of the bikes that we have tested and will test can do. So if you're set on getting a cruiser style e-bike, you're on a budget, you want to get something that is built well, has plenty of power, and that you'll be able to upgrade, this is a fantastic option. And I personally don't see any reason to spend a ton of extra money if you're looking for something to start out as a baseline for future upgrade projects. I do think that there are a couple small things that the Super 73 does better, having ridden a couple myself, and I understand why people do spend the money to get such a nice bike. But when looking at the things that matter the most, this does those just as well as any other cruiser style e-bike on the market.
So if you like this bike, you can check it out down below at the link in the description. If you enjoyed this review, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and remember, stay frosty.